Hello again, everyone. I'm just going to give a minute or two for a few more participants to join in before kicking off today's lecture. Thank you. Okay, I think we've gotten a couple more in this time, but maybe we can kick off since we also have recording, and then yeah, hopefully from the start and the recap, the last few people can start filtering in as well. Okay, let me start by sharing slides. There we go. That should be visible. Great. So welcome again, everyone, for the last session of our first collaborative training program. Yeah, we hope you have enjoyed it up to now, and we'll continue with the data collection focus. Apologies on the title of this slide. This should be demand and transport sector. We will continue from yesterday going into demand data collection, so a couple of different types of demands. Then we will have a brief intro into transport data collection for different kinds of assets, so separate sector. And then it's going to start bringing the course to a close with bringing everything together and a section at the end for questions or comments from your end and course conclusion. So quick recap as normal. So we've gone from Monday, starting to look at the basic building blocks of energy systems. The challenging is the benefits of modeling and being able to abstract certain concepts to model systems for useful results. Yesterday, we started introducing the best practices for data collection and a lot of examples for Stephen's inputs. There was a lot of focus on how to get those units and that kind of examples, but the practice can be replicated or applied depending on specific goals and aims that you have. And today we're gonna continue looking at some other data collection guidelines, and this specifically for transport and demand assets, and the conclusion of the series. So let's dive into demand data collection. So as we saw in the very first day, you might remember the same image. Electricity demands varies instantaneously, and we have like very distinguished hourly and daily profiles. And throughout the year, we might see seasonal variations. So when we're modeling for a single year, this will be, instead of a single value like we have seen for costs or other techno-economic data, we're going to have a full profile. For the whole year, that would be 8,760 rows. That provides that for each country. So we're going to be looking within Stevens and GMPA, for example, and often in models at a national level. but this granularity sort of spatially can be lower depending on how power systems operate for different kinds of models. Just a note on this, we are assuming currently like non-leap years to simplify a little bit what the data collection is, but obviously if you want a more realistic representation, then you'd have to like have this assumption considered. For long-term applications, for example, you can include leap years if that's something that will significantly alter your results. As we have done for other techno-economic parameters, I wanted to show some sources and a few sort of like pointers of where to start and where to look for data. This data set from Plexo's world is quite good in the sense that it offers very consistent data for like 2015. So we have all of the countries in the world, sort of like their national electricity demand profiles at an hourly rate in a single data source with their own assumptions. In this way, we can obtain like what the load shape is, so sort of like that, what the diagram that we saw before. And we can have an assumption of how large this total demand will be. So we can scale that, but this will assume sort of like the same shape. This would be how you go and access it. So I've included the link of where the dataset is, and this also links to the research paper that you can consult, and going and finding the specific country that you're looking for or region, depending on what the requirements are. A downloaded file. Sorry, here. Let me bring this back here. This will look like this. So we have one column per each country, and they're prefixed with the region of the world that they are. So for Europe, we're going to have EU and the 3-letter country code. The note that I want to give for this is that this file, the data sources are all in UTC time. So while for Stevens modeling this, we can use this as is because it's referenced to UTC, going to be sort of like that same instantaneous electricity demand. So if we're going to be trading, we're interested in seeing it like at the same time, sort of from this baseline in the same, like grade, because we're not. When you want to look into, for example, like the patterns of when in the day demand might be peaking, then you're interested in local times, and then you'd have to adapt the profile to its local time depending on UTC. So for example, in Austria, like Central Europe might be +1, or you might have like a +2 in Cyprus, and then that just alters where in the local time you'd have that. But if you want to be trading electricity, you want the baseline time reference to match. That's just to show what the demand dataset looks like and how you can use it. We do have a note on whether it's better to have like most recent data versus the more consistent available. Obviously, 2015 was 11 years ago, and the load shapes might have changed. The totals obviously have increased up to where we are now. So this becomes a question of trade-offs again, of what will be better for your model, what type of question you're trying to answer, and whether you want to have like the most recent or you are more interested in a more consistent data set. Because you can always go back to look for this data in specific like country databases for individual regions, but this has like the whole world in it. So a good start point is here. Specifically for Stevens, we want to use units in gigawatts. So that's the parameter that it takes demand in. So we were going to have to convert the megawatt that Plexus is providing for us in this example for a dataset in gigawatts. Here you have the conversion sort of like explained and how you transfer that. And also how to calculate the total annual demand. So even if we're using the load shape from that 2015 value, but we want to look towards the future, we would have to scale this demand to better represent the total electricity demand. To be able to convert that, we need to understand what the total was in 2015 and what the total might be in the future to be able to scale that profile. Once we have the total from our own dataset, we can look into other datasets that project demand or that have the total annual demand. Ember is a good source for yearly electricity data. You also have sources like Our World in Data sometimes reports good projections. So depending on the year that you'd want to have, you would look for that total estimation, which again will come with its own assumptions of projections and how this is estimated. A lot of the time, electricity demand will be projected to grow with, for example, like GDP or population. Like the more people you have, the more energy demand you'll need. And then you can scale it depending on the version of your total. From the Ember file that we've suggested, here are sort of like the instructions and more detailed for reference if you go into the dataset and you need to find something more specific or exactly how to treat the data or process the data that you originally gathered, then you can get the value for total demand. So now you have the demand for the country that you need in the most recent year, for example, to scale it from 2015 in terawatt hours. So you'd have to get the ratio from the version that we had from the total from 2015 to the version that you want, and then you can multiply that to scale the profile. And you'll basically have, if you were to plot it, you would have the same shapes, but one would be larger than the other depending on the scaling that resulted from getting this. Like I said, this can be for like the most recent year available, or it can be from projections into the future, depending on the assumptions that you're going to be looking at. High temperature heating demand. Similarly to electricity demand, we have a sort of like an asset in Stevens for high temperature heating. As I've mentioned before, this is the focus for industrial heating. So like kilns that require a lot of energy to melt or to process materials so that we can get the end product. When we haven't had industry like very specifically modeled, this demand helps us understand those energy needs, which are quite high. Because we have this hourly matching and profile, so if we're going to be looking at electricity at an hourly rate, we want to have high temperature heating demand that is also at this level. This is for a reason that when we have the kilns or the ovens from fossil generation, the demand for them will be hourly in a way, but you might be able to get it just like an annual sort of like fuel throughput. And that might be good for the model on its own. But once we're trying to link to electricity and to offer options such as electric kilns, then we need this to match, because this will sort of like increase and the levels of demand and make us translate that. So in order to get such demand profiles instead of totals, which often come in industry at an annual level, we can use a couple of different assumptions, whether it be like a constant or trying to estimate by weekday or weekend. This can come from initially one of the data kits that we shared yesterday as well. So instead of looking at the just like the power data, we're going to go into the sort of like the heating data from the CCG starter data kits. So we're going to go the same process as yesterday to the website. If you already have downloaded the energy data from CCG, then you're fine, but you're going to go into the SAND file. So that's an important caveat to make. And you're going to find a very large table that you can filter out by different types of assets. So we're navigating to the parameters, and we have the accumulated annual demand for the first region, and the fuel is IND HEH, so industrial heating. That's the code that is used in osmosis. So this is another important note of when using like cross models. Each of them will have their own abbreviations or their own details, and looking through the documentation or the trainings that are available for these other sources, it's important to be able to identify what things could be sort of like cross-used or cross-checked. And finally, again, a little bit of emphasis going into what the units are for each of these parameters, let's say. So the data conversion that we're going to need for that. So once we have that, we can use a conversion for gigawatt hours. And this is again to like match the whole entire unit set for Stevens, where we're going to have everything interconnected between each other. This is a conversion from gigawatt hours to, from petajoules to gigawatt hours. So for example, if you have a total demand of 33.3, this would be your total for industrial heating demand. Another option of sources, here are some links where you can like go and look and also cross-check and validate the values or at least the magnitudes that certain countries have. Going into national sources is always a good approach. So if you don't find global data sets or like very balanced things that include a lot of data, you might need to go into specific countries' national sources and search the statistics or the values that you're searching for. As I mentioned, for the couple of options that we'd have for these profiles, so if we are assuming a constant profile because industry moves different than sort of like overall electricity, you can use that total energy and divide that by the total hours in the year. That will create sort of like this constant profile that has the same value for the entire year and can give us a good enough assumption to start with, at least, if we're going to be modeling these two sectors. On the other hand, there's also availability for weekend and weekday data. So for industry, because of like workdays and how the markets often work, the demand required for certain productions might be different from the weekdays between the weekends, and that can be where you get some of that variation and better representation. So this specific data set, which is a projection based on SSP2 scenario, which is the baseline of like not much, not major action, not major climate action. So like sort of like continuing a little bit with things as how they're going. And they have projections up to 2100. There's a lot of uncertainty in the future projections, as there is with everything, but this is where scenario analysis could come in the future. You can filter these for the year that you want to model for. So the data set, the single sort of data set includes that for a lot of individual countries, and were not available for a simple country. They have regional averages, and you can see that in the sort of like CSV file, which is similar to the one that I showed for electricity demand, and get the data for weekend and weekdays. You can use a Python script to sort of like automate that process of figuring out for a specific year, does it start with a weekday or does it not start with a weekday, and sort of like build the weeks for the entire year to create that profile. In the end, that could look something like this. So as you can see, we have the lower values of demands for the weekends and a lot higher demand for the weekdays. But you have that sort of like constant or relatively constant throughout the year as you get the industry usage, which is quite different from electricity demand, which often has a peak. Depending on where you are in the world, it could have like peaking in the summer or peaking in the winter. Finally, this last little sort of resource, going back to where to link this into Stevens directly. So in the Stevens repository, we have the assets. Some assets have a profiles folder, and that's where this hourly data will go. So in this example, I have sort of like for electricity demand and the profiles folder, we can have files that are named. The CCC here is the country code. So 3-letter country code, as we saw in the electricity demand data set. the year. So if we have projected, or if you're using a previous year, put the year that the data is coming from and the unit. That's sort of like the naming convention that we have for demand profiles, whether they be heating or electricity. And then when you go into the parameters file, so within that asset folder here, you've gone into the profiles, you've created this. But if you go into parameters.csv, then you have the linking of where to find it. You will write exactly the name without the file type ending, where the profile is coming from. And the type will be the same as we had for the techno-economic values. For Philippines, the asset type in your network structure and asset parameter definition from the case studies will be that number. So I didn't know to go for the Philippines file. Same will apply for high temperature heating demand. It's exactly the same profile and exactly the same convention, but it will be under HTH demand asset. Okay, so that's sort of like inputting certain profiles. There's also profiles for renewable energy, but that could be a different process. And you have the capacity factor profiles, and the model will be able to find them. If you want to explore where those are, I can also give a little sort of like live representation of those and how to collect them. But going into transport sector data collection, this is for the assets that represent the transport sector, naturally. And this is for technologies that are currently being sort of like developed and included. Specifically, we are looking right now at road transport, both for passenger and for transport of goods. So this is right now an exploratory stage. So we're looking at data sets that have already been collected, specifically, like we've seen a lot of like CCG's transport starter data kits. We're going to go into that. And this may include passenger activity. So how much passenger is required? This would be like the demand for passenger type of vehicles, or we have freight activity, that kind of demand. We have the vehicle stock, how many vehicles are there in the fleet in the country, energy intensity, to be able to convert between different vectors. For example, you would use the energy intensity and emissions, etc. Like all of this data will be required so that we can model or an approximation of the transport sector. So we're going back to our trusted source. So for the CCG data kits, instead of looking at energy sector like we have been looking, there is a link for the transport data set. Again, this is like the data that is used in osmosis modeling. So you can see a lot of cross collaboration between them. We have, let me quickly, just a second to show the data set. So for example, it's a slightly different data set that we've seen before. And CCG has always these summaries and sort of like understanding of where the papers are, the abstract, definitions of the things that are presented with the notes and the things that you need to like consult to understand what the data set includes, and some notes. And the data for the transport sector will look like this. I wanted to show this specific one because it not only includes the data like we saw for demand, for example, but this sort of like records again like that good practices of data collection in a very complete way. So we have separation to be able to filter easily by continent, country codes, all of this metadata that might be useful for a system to like use this in an automated way. And then we have this is a numeric country code. That's another sort of value for metadata. Then we have the variable or the parameter in this case. So you'd have for a single country, you have population, you have GDP, GDP growth, passenger activity, freight activity, all of this data relevant to the transport sector, what type of variable or parameter this is, a subtype if needed. For example, here, if you see like the energy intensity for road transport, and this is for a car. the fuel, electric, or you can have hybrid. What's the destination, urban destination. And that's how you start understanding what kind of data is available. You have the data code. These are the data codes that Osmosis will be using, and the unit. So as we've seen, like the data template that we saw before, we had the units that Stephen will be using, and the unit for the original source. So this data has already been collected and converted to, if needed, to the units that are displayed here. And we have the citation. So all of the sources are recorded here. And finally, we have the notes that you can consult what each of these means in the final table. So is it a normal value? Is it a time series break? What the processing might have been, if it was a missing value, etc. And finally, the data. And in this case, we have data from 1990 to 2021 where available. But as you can see, there are always some gaps depending on what we are able to find. So this is a first really good approach to go into transport data collection, because a big effort has already been gone into going into these specific sources. But to show you that you can always, if there's missing data, there's always good sources or good national sources that you might be able to find at least some approximates, whether they be regional or country specific. Okay, so that's our first suggestion for transport data collection. Cool. This will bring sort of like our specific guidelines and overall sort of training to a close. So I wanted to do like a short overarching conclusion to start bringing everything that we've seen this week together. So data quality, we're going to be asking the right questions. So the best data sets we've seen are not always necessarily the most complete or the most detailed, but they're the ones that are most appropriate to answer your question. In a similar way that the best model is not going to be the one that covers everything that you want, it's going to be the one that answers your question as best as it can. Some questions regarding data that should always be asked is the source credible? Is the data recent? So like, is it representative enough to what I want to model because it's been recorded recently? Is it representative of my study area? So I've been talking a lot about being able to use like proxies for like from regional data to a country. Is this representative enough? It might be. Is it internally consistent? So do we have consistent data within each other? Is it complete? We've seen that this can often not be the case, but can we get complete enough data? And does it match the temporal and spatial resolutions that I need? So these are some good questions to get started to see whether your data is going to be useful for your modeling. And I wanted to caveat this, I think I said it a little bit before, but sometimes it's not necessarily that like you're going to have to 100% answer the question. So if you want a credible source, like that's going to be a yes or no answer for sure. But can it be like, is the data recent enough? What is going to be good enough for your model to offer some reliable results? Is it sufficiently representative of my study area? So I don't have country-specific data, but can I have regional data that is sufficiently representative? Again, is it complete enough to give me like the first good idea and to start approaching a better understanding of the region? Which leads to the sort of like rule of thumb that modeling and data collection is a very iterative process. So like, don't let perfect become the enemy of like good enough. A lot of the time, you're not going to find the perfect thing in data and in modeling. So we build the best we have and the best available information. We can understand where these uncertainties come from. We can run scenarios. We can run sensitivity analysis. We can do a lot of things. We can engage with countries or with experts directly to see if things make sense or if the data is good enough. And then we go ahead and improve the data and do that again. And it can be an iterative process because as well as time moves on, the most recent available data that we used in the first instance, in 2 years from now, 3 years from now, is not going to be the same. So we need to constantly be updating this, iterating the efforts to make sure that we have the most useful information. So this is the sort of like wrap up of modeling and data iterative processes. I wanted to also touch upon a brief note of open source modeling. So open source coding or modeling is generally like releasing the foundational code, or it can be releasing algorithms or even data to decentralize the sort of like that availability for a community focus. It can have a lot of positive aspects because it allows the community to view, explore, and modify the work, and it's very a collaborative sort of like ethos. As we've seen, Stevens and Osmosis, these are models that are open source and available for everyone. But these also have some caveats that, for example, in early development or early adopters may face some like system-specific bugs or some broken features. So this to make the note of having a broad user base can help us catch these and improve the ability to fix them, and just like be aware of where we are in the model development. I wanted to bring this up because I know that there have been a few sort of issues with different systems with the version that we've provided for you. So just to sort of reinforce this idea of like the feedback that you've provided has been really good, because then it helps us understand where certain vulnerabilities may be in the code. And if you do go ahead to later explore not only Stevens, but any other sort of like open source material, to just like keep that in mind, that there are things that may happen, and there are generally quite large and cooperative communities that have support available, that may have already raised the issue, and you can find a solution for it. So yeah, I wanted to like thank people that have gotten us back to us with that feedback, and we hope to make the model a lot more resilient for different applications and in different systems. With that, we're coming closer to sort of like what the course has been, concluding the course, and a space for general question. So the key course takeaways, to really emphasize everything: energy modeling will simplify our reality. They do not intend to reproduce it. Any model does not intend to reproduce reality. The good data behind the model is just as important as a good model. Transparency and documentation are essential. As I've shown, like really keeping track of where things are coming from and the assumptions behind them are very important to track the effectiveness and the usefulness of results. Every own model will be built on its own assumptions. And if we're going to be using data from one model to another, it's important to understand what these are to ensure that the data is consistent and that the results are reliable and useful. And finally, again, like models are here to like support decisions and to help us analyze systems and what actions we can start to take, but they are not intended to replace any decision makers. So what are your next steps after this course? Like we've concluded, we've gone over like a broad overarching theme and focused on Stevens. So keep exploring it. Please like help us with feedback, with anything that you want to be, if this is useful for you in your applications, and any other models that you might find. Like use the tools that we've gone over here that are sort of like generalizable. While we focused a lot in Stevens, this is applicable to different environments. And practice building simple models, looking at the different kinds of tools and their goals. What questions do they answer? Do they are these similar than the questions that you want to answer? Model scenarios and design that. And finally, collect your own data sheets, read some published studies, like have a deeper look into this with a modeler thinking mindset, and explore other tools and frameworks. Stevens and the models that we've shown here are focused on energy system, but I know that a lot of you may be from like very different backgrounds. So yeah, we really like encourage you to go and explore that, because there are tools for many different sort of like research purposes or answering different questions in the space of climate studies and reducing emissions. So definitely go have a look at that. On a concluding note as well, for like the impact of what like Stevens may be applied for and the GMPA as a reminder. So a brief note of what this tool is for. So the Global Mitigation Potential Atlas is in general to encourage this international collaboration. So as we saw a few lectures ago, the best resources are not necessarily found where they are needed. So collaboration is always a good incentive to try and share these resources and be able to like reduce our emissions. In the end, emissions don't really see borders, and the whole sort of like planet is affected. So we want to maximize impact and collaboration. We have seen from our result and our initial analysis shows that it's a promising avenue for being able to reach these goals. We have presented the tool we launched it a few years ago in COP28, and we have been presenting it for 3 years now, as we've expanding on the breadth, the depth, and the impact of our modeling and analysis. And the aim is to eventually grow and eventually get to that global scale, to have modeling available for all countries, and to have this engagement and this sort of networking in a way and collaboration with people to get better data, to get better understanding of where decision makers could step towards to reduce emissions. So I wanted to touch on this, on like what the real world impact of Stevens or GMPA as tools might be. While Stevens is the background of GMPA, it can also be used on its own as a tool separately, as you have seen for open source modeling. But it is the backbone and the underlying basis of the atlas. On the other hand, at Moya, we have a team that has been working on using the physics behind Stevens and the overall like theory behind it to develop Moya Cascade. So this tool leverages that like theoretical background of Stevens to build custom process models. So this is for like a more corporate level understanding, to understand either like product level or overall like corporate level impact. So whatever the full process may be, you may use the tool to that sort of like diagram it out, have the full process, and understand where vulnerabilities or where like low-hanging fruit may be to reduce overall emissions. The tool is also in early stages, so as you can see, this is the beta version. But the aim is still to try and create the most impact where it matters most. So driving to prioritize those investment decisions in this collaborative effort that will be to reduce emissions in general for the climate. So this is another sort of example where we're trying to get this like real world impact. And these tools are a little bit like early stages, but there's a lot of traction that we've been gathering. There has been interest from countries to include the tool in reporting, to do specific modelings, to feedback data into us for the GMPA, for example. And that's already sort of like hitting with this aim of collaborative environment, of getting this back and forth and this iterative process to get to a point where good decisions can be made. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of like wrap that up for the tool that we've been seeing. And right now, I just want to like open the floor a little bit. This is your chance to ask questions or comment on anything you'd like to comment on after we've concluded this course. We've had sort of like 3 assignments. Yeah, please, I'll be really happy to hear from you. Okay.
Hi, Monica. Can I
Hi.
ask you? Yes, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Well,
please.
so I ran the model as instructed and also analyzed my own case studies in which Vietnam and Laos and Thailand collaborated with each other. And
Hmm.
the result turns out that the total cost of installing the energy system, it's a little bit, it's a little bit brutal. It costs more than $500 billion. And I
Yeah,
wonder, and I wonder if that is the data set just for us to practice, or did I do something wrong? Maybe I didn't use the right units for the assets. I don't know what's the problem.
I see. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so a couple of things that have happened there. The data set that the things that are available for the costs and everything currently have been collected for the GMPA before. So we are confident that this is at least like a first good approach, and the number might be in sort of like the range. Um, the magnitude of it has three aspects mainly. So you're involving three countries. So that is the infrastructure needed for those three countries in total. So it's not like a single one. In the end, the total cost of that, when you have collaboration, would have to be divided by them. Now that raises different questions of, okay, then who pays for what? And this is sort of like another level of analysis that we have when we're thinking of collaboration, and that we're thinking to develop in the future. But that's one of it. And the second aspect of it is that the cost result is representing of installing the whole system from zero and operating the whole system over a 30-year project. So the model and the version that you have run, that's what like sort of like the assumption is. So this doesn't mean that it would have to be like paid overnight. The market and the investment installation of that, considering that sort of like simplifying assumption, in reality would look a little bit differently, and the investment would be sort of like annualized payments divided. But in the end, yes, it's a very large investment. Infrastructure costs can be very high, and that's sort of like the detail. As we move, just sort of like an additional note to that, when we move from this whole assumption of like this is just operating for like 30 years and this is a total cost of what it would be, we could have an analysis where it's more, if we have that pathway of when you're installing how much and where, we can have those annualized costs better defined. So you can still see an overall like very large sum of money in the orders of hundreds of billions, maybe, especially for like many countries collaborating within each other. But you can view, okay, this means that every year this is what we have to be paying and the cost may be increasing and so on. And like I said, later on, we'd have to analyze, okay, like what is a fair way to divide these costs? If Cambodia or if Vietnam, for example, if they were planning on their own, might have seen like, oh, it installed like a lot of solar, for example. I don't know. But when it's collaborating, there's less solar in Vietnam, but it's a lot more solar somewhere else. Then comes the question, now Vietnam might be importing that energy. So should they be paying for parts of that infrastructure and so on and so forth? So these are like kind of questions, but yes, it's important. And I understand that the magnitude could have been a little bit like out of complete proportion, but that's the reason behind it.
Yes, thank you, Monica. And I think that I should um like sort of look through the recommended courses at the beginning of the training program that you guys gave us to understand more about the energy system. I mean, for each case studies, because for my case, I use I mean. I take a small wine manufacturing plant for my case, and I think I need to go more detail into the energy system of the plant to understand the models.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yes, I would recommend just having a look at other tools as well, and like assumptions, and re sort of checking the data maybe is a good practice. But yeah, if certain technologies that you have in your network are very expensive, then that's going to shoot up prices quite a lot as well. So it might be like that kind of choices that are also impacting.
Oh, yes, I have one last question. It's that when I open the parameter CSV file of the EL demand,
Mhm.
electricity, I mean EL demand, that is the name of the file, of the CSV file. And I only saw one row, which is the case of Singapore, and no other asset and no other type. I mean the column that listed the type, and in the description of the GitHub, that row, that column means that column is the I mean the code, the number which is related to each country, the data of each country. For example, the type is zero, the value is zero for the first for the type of the first row. Then that is the data of Singapore. But there are no rows for my case. I mean Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand and Laos. Yeah, so I
Okay.
had to remove that. I had to remove the EL demand. And
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Of course. So this might be just a difference of like updating, but to showcase what this would mean, for example. Okay, so in this case, I do
Yes, that
see the
EL demand,
full.
not constant, not EL demand.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's one of the things that's a good identifying. So we have these two options. So as a sort of like additional note, this asset was created for assumption of like constant demand, so it doesn't have varying profiles. And then this, the here means unmet. And this asset was created to simulate the sort of like when I mentioned about the node balances, where right now, like Stevens has to meet like 100% of demand to be feasible. You can determine a certain share of the annual demand that you would allow to not be met. So with underlying data of what the total demand actually is, the model has a little bit of room to play with. So the total there has like that a reliability parameter, for example. So a user may use that for more reliability analysis. So let's say like 5% of the annual demand, you think like it's allowable to be unmet and have a little bit of blackouts. So these are two slightly different demand assets, but the basic sort of electricity demand that we had been working on is this. But even so, if you still have, let's see for here, let's see if that one. So this one has less, for example, for the constant demand parameters, we don't have the 30 countries, but you can still, when you add a new country, if you need to add a new country, if you have the profile, let's say here we only have these two, for example. But if you go into the EL demand profiles, we have all of these. If we do have Vietnam for 2050 or for 2019, then we can add a row in that parameter CSV if it is in there. So let's assume that it only has Singapore, like the one that you saw. Then you'd be able to add, okay, then number one would be the Vietnam version. And this is the sort of location name. So yeah, these two parameters are define like the the set when we're doing that time reduction. So the time steps that you choose, this will define that each first like block of distributed throughout the year is going to be 24 hours. So that's like the note on that. That's we see everything be the same here for that, but this could be defined a different way, but 24 hours makes sense for analysis for us at this stage. But yeah, does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay. In the chat for the Philippine setting, since we're archipelago and not physically interconnected with most ASEAN countries, how should we apply this energy modeling framework? Would it be more appropriate to model inter-island energy systems instead of regional collaboration? Yes, you can definitely do that. So currently, what we have sort of like described in GMPA and the approach of collaboration is at a national scale. But we have the location nodes of like, okay, Brazil will be the location node and South Africa will be this location node. But if you zoom into the Philippines, then you can have different nodes and you can then name the locations differently. So like for each island, you can have a code so that you can recognize which data is coming from, and you could have more granular data for like inter-country analysis. Yeah, for like each island, then you'd have, okay, this island has this demand, this island has this demand, and then you can model that inter-island system in using Stevens as well. So this can be used for like within countries, even if it's not sort of like an archipelago like that, like that's sort of like geographically split by water. You could have, if you have a very large country, for example, like Russia or China, like very, very widely expands, then it might make sense to also do that division. And if you have the data from those electricity nodes separately, you can do that smaller for sure. Okay. Don't see any additional questions in the chats. I will still keep an eye on that. But yeah, okay. If nothing else comes up, I'll keep an eye. We wanted from Moya and Ace to thank you for your participation in the course. It has been really great to go through this week with you. The program has been very useful and has already let us learn a lot. But please, we will send a post quiz, and it would be really helpful to have some feedback and to evaluate the effectiveness of the course. We hope that you have enjoyed and you have found this useful and interesting, and that this can sort of like be this starting point for next endeavors that you might have, and that this is something, yeah, that is useful for you in the future. I know that we have covered a bit of like a lot in a high level and trying to go like deep into Stevens, but as I've said, a lot of these concepts are very applicable to different environments, and it's a lot that you can like go and explore and figure out some things for yourself. Feel free to connect with us. Please always like feedback and future collaborations are always like quite important. So yeah, we hope you have enjoyed the course and that this is something useful. Yes, thank you, Natalia. Yes, the certificate will be delivered by email after everything has been completed. And on the note of assignments, yes. It's Sunday anytime during the day. So like basically at like midnight Sunday, just to sort of like put an end of date to that. You can submit your assignments and we will still receive them to like be able to assess everything and confirm everyone's participation. Yes, Anik, you want to say something, please?
Thanks, Monica. Hi, everyone. Once again, thank you so much for uh, taking the time to go through the course. I hope you all found it really, really helpful. And I hope this helps you like, apply it in your own work that you do, whether it's like in the current place that you are, maybe some other new places that you want to go to. One other thing that we also wanted to say is that um, right now for GMPA, we're in phase 3 of GMPA. We're doing some work, and we are in fact potentially looking for some new people to join the team for maybe like a 1-year contract or something. So this would be so these people might be helping Monica with some of the data gathering for the Stevens model to be put into GMPA. You guys have like now gone through the process, you know roughly what to expect. So I guess like after this, like we would reach out to some of you if you guys are interested. We can do some interviews and see whether like this is something that you guys want to engage with us with and be part of the GMPA team. Um, so again, like we're working on it. Phase 2 is already going. Then one of the next steps that we need to do is kind of like data gathering for a huge number of countries for various sectors. So if you guys would like to be a part of this, send us an email as well, and then we'll like go through it and then basically like reach out to you. And then we can have like quick interviews and stuff, and from there we can take it from there. One- Right.
Yes, definitely.
Is someone from ACE here, Indira or something? Does anyone want to say anything?
I believe the concluding reminds. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just want to tell you guys that Indira could not come to the end of the meeting. But yeah, I just want to thank Monica, Anik, and also Moya for sharing your expertise for the first ARNECC training program. It has been an insightful 5 days, and congratulations as well to all the participants for completing the whole week of training. So, I just want to share a few quick reminders that the materials and the recording will be updated and also shared at the end of the session, and to submit your assignments by Sunday, 19 July, at the end of Sunday. And also, like I've shared through message, that your certificates will be shared through email, ideally after the completion of all the assignments. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I'll send all of the resources and then you should have the complete sort of like
I think
decks and everything for this. Yeah.
I think Christine has her hand
Oh,
raised.
yes, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. So I would like just to thank you guys. So it's been a week of very insightful with you, though it may be a short time, but we are still working on it and we gain a definitely meaningful, especially in modeling energy systems that we can actually apply in our professions. So as someone also working in a plant, so I can be able to share this knowledge. But yeah, so grateful and salamat from the Philippines.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much, Christine. Appreciate it. Great stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I
Thank you
think
all
then,
much.
yeah, that concludes the course. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll be hearing from us a little bit for the last few bits, but thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone, and thanks once again, Ace and Nathania. And
Thank you.
have a good rest of the weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.